Exceptional Randos show is produced live in the Sunroom Studios base command center. Definitely not a capsule anymore. Man, so this pair of gold Pumas with 5 stars and 5 stripes sold out in like an hour, apparently. I just can't imagine. No, they're not. They're the Trump Red Wave sneakers.
Oh, those things. Oh my God, the Mr. T's. Man, those totally remind me of like Rocky 3 Mr. T promo shit. He's trying to sell is like, I bet you the fool that don't get these shoes here at Nike. Whoever would make it. And
I swear I had a Pumas back in like middle school that looked just like those. Except they weren't gold and they didn't. Well, I wish they'd have had a T on them, but it would have been for my name.
Apparently, they were calling him Al Bundy being a shoe salesman. That's what was trending. I was like, what the fuck is Al Bundy trending for? Like, oh, this guy is selling shoes now. It's so funny how much the right wing has just turned into grifting other right wingers and like.
I hope nobody even pretends to believe that guy could like put on a pair of sneakers and like actually utilize them.
No way. I mean, I've had gout before, and there's no way that dude doesn't have gout constantly. Like knowing what he eats and fucking his body type and all that shit, where I'm like, his foot is not fitting in one of those shoes on any day of the week, let alone him using it to actually go play basketball or some shit like that.
I almost hope that we get to see images of people wearing them in public now, because he sold out.
Feel like that was probably
$400 a pair.
Yeah, probably resellers.
What kind of douchebag buys a $400 pair of gold rip-off Pumas? Real Pumas don't cost that much.
Well, do you remember when he did the NFTs and they thought they swore that was going to be the next? I feel like that was the final nail in the coffin for NFTs, where people were already skeptical.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, can these things just go away? But whenever he made those Trump NFTs, it was like game over. I don't think I've heard any NFT. I don't think any NFT collections that have been made in a positive light since that one. And the only reason it was even in a positive light is because he bought airtime for advertisement. So, the tech. On that note, it's funny to see the AI hype fizzle out so fast. I knew it was going to be a faster than usual hype cycle, but Midjourney is already losing users but over the month, like month over month. OpenAI is, they've made their the prospect of them being the quote unquote savior of the economy, but also needing $7 trillion to do it. They made themselves dead on arrival, because I don't think anyone besides the people who were already heavily invested into it are going to buy that. And it sounds so ridiculous when they were trying to make it seem like they were on the cusp of that breakthrough for algorithmic general intelligence or artificial general intelligence, whichever framework they came from, where it's like that was they were trying to hype it up so people would invest, and said they were on the cusp, and then they were like, actually we need $7 trillion to cross that threshold.
Yeah, so we get to 99%. That last percent is a lot. It's a logarithm. It's a lot steeper than it looks like.
Exactly.
Like the amount of power required to get from 99 to 100% is.
Oh my God!
It's like unfathomable. Getting to 99% is an achievement.
and we were saying that, and it's funny to have like that perspective before they got to that point when they were trying to like lie to everyone and hype up their product and make it seem like they were closer than they were. Um, and the people like us calling them out and being made to seem as if we're the ones who are crazy. But then when we're constantly proven right, it's just funny to me. I think that's why it's important not to like sell out the discussion of like something that's actually trying to make a point. It If there was any sort of like ad pressure or ad revenue, there was no way we would be able to discuss things in that manner and actually get to the topic in a way that addresses it realistically and not trying to like play into the hype. Because if you look at every company that has to cater to the market, they've added AI into their stack somewhere, whether it's in name only or if it's on the side just to like give you the semblance that as a user that they've incorporated AI somewhere into their product. Even fucking Windows has the AI shit, and so I'm like, they tried. It's fucking Cortana all over again. Because I'm like,
I think the real concern is what problem does this actually solve?
it doesn't. It's the square peg
Like
and round hole.
it's one thing to use machine learning and build some kind of language model or object modeling lexicon and then utilize that as the foundation to do something with it. I'm not sure what that thing is entirely. That there are a lot of people who are trying to figure out how to use this stuff in a meaningful and creative way, and that stuff's not there yet. It's still, I think that stuff's still incubating. But in terms of general computer users, I mean, I've been using Google's AI assisted search for the past, I don't know, however long it's been since they gave me the option. And some of it's fine, and some of it's kind of like, you know, I could have read the actual article or read the actual white paper or the actual document itself, and this thing is synthesizing something out of it. And I'm not even sure how accurate it really is. It gives me its best guess, I guess, I assume. But that doesn't really solve a problem because I didn't have problems searching for things in the first place. I do like the idea of I do like a lot of the things that I've seen on YouTube, though. Like, there's a bunch of generative videos, music videos. It's just background imagery for the music. It's no longer, hey, actively pay attention to this, because most of it's a morphing wash of cartoon like imagery, sci-fi cartoon imagery, and none of it means anything. It doesn't tell a story. There are no characters. Half the time,
what's hilarious to me is when people take a Bollywood clip and act like they used Midjourney or whatever to generate it and believe it.
no, the AI.
That's the fad that is really entertaining me right now.
So the AI stuff that I find most appealing isn't pretending to be anything other than like a wash of pleasing dreamlike imagery, because it's just accompanying some music that's in the background that I'm not sitting there watching the screen like there's a music video of a performance where I want to see some musicians do something really spectacular, because I know that the creative person who created that thing sat behind a computer and typed a few statements, some prompts. Maybe they had like a whole really verbose, like, whole page worth of prompts and negative prompts to create a music video that does something really cool, but none of that stuff tells a story. And so it doesn't take the front seat. And I really like that, because I think the music video took away a lot from, well, it created a whole different form of expression, but it also is a distraction from the music itself. I
mean, that's assuming that the music wasn't meant to go with the video in the first place.
That's true.
I think that's the problem. If a song wasn't created with a vision and then a music video slapped on top of it, it can be very incongruous. And I don't think those are
I think we got a whole
all
decade of like the
music videos.
90s where we got a lot
Hype
of
Williams, it's postmodernism,
yeah.
and that's the issue. Is like when you're talking about postmodernism, it doesn't have to make sense, and that's the problem with that genre. Or it's even like I think they might even call it postmodern at this point. So it's like um, then they started having that aesthetic introduced into film. So like when Hype Williams made Belly, I don't know if you've seen it or
Oh
not.
yeah, I've seen Belly.
But at the time it felt revolutionary, and over time it's obvious that it didn't age well for many reasons. But the issue is that when you don't have a reason, ironically, when you don't have a reason for something and you're just doing it for the sake of aesthetics, that novelty doesn't hold up over time. And I think that's unless the aesthetics are just so good. And at that point, it's like now we're now it's the aesthetics. It's not like a novelty. So um when you're talking about focusing on aesthetics as a form of expression for the sake of elevating one's experience, that then becomes a meaning. But just like abstract concepts with some aesthetic flair doesn't always get elevated to the point of being worthy of actually giving someone or giving the video someone's attention.
I mean, the cheese and the bread and the charcuterie board or whatever at the art gallery doesn't alter the paintings on the wall.
But at the same time, if somebody's blood sugar is low, like they may not give a piece the time of day, or they may approach it in a different way than if they had a full belly. So like on the one hand, it doesn't change the art on the wall, but it can change the viewer and give them a like. And this is where to me,
no,
like,
it's true because I can't stand like incense. Incense have always just like
there's
been problematic for me, and it would ruin the entire experience for me.
It's like certain ways you can like get to a fine point of balancing stimuli, and getting to a point where then you're like overstimulating someone, and it doesn't allow that person to experience whatever thing it is. Because this is something I've also been thinking about. The benefit of scale in the real world is not actually. I don't know if we're gonna until we get like if we ever get a holodeck that goes to scale. I don't know if we're going to be able to understand things through a screen in a way where I see why the Scorseses or whatever get or Villeneuve's get mad when people are like watching their films on phones, where it's like it was meant to be seen on a giant fucking screen, not like somebody's cell phone. So
yeah, you're
it's
not
kind
supposed
of
to
like,
hold your phone like 3 inches away from your face to simulate the size of a 200-inch screen.
or and it won't even ever like
It won't look right.
Like it won't mimic that experience.
No.
And that's where on the one hand, it's like I do feel there's some restrictive aspect of creating things like that are meant to be that scale at that size, because it only like allows people to experience the full experience in a theater. But
Ridley Scott's a good example of that. He makes some really gigantic scene movies, and I remember seeing several of his movies, like where in the theater you could see this detail in like the textures of walls of everything that just even with like the 4K remastering doesn't translate properly because it's just not big enough. It's like, oh yeah, that's just some scratches on a rock. But when the rock is a quarter of the size of the screen and it's now a giant boulder, that those scratchings make sense. Not when it's the size of like a cantaloupe in front of you.
Yeah, and on that note, it's like at the same time they're using the novelty of the size of the screen to induce this overstimulated effect where it's like, yeah, anybody who puts something at that size, it's going to like create some sense of awe just because it's a fucking 200-foot screen. So it's like,
Let me start, man. I go sit down, like I'm down on the floor, like looking at like the back of the floor seating, because I want to be so close that the edges of the screen are almost at the edges of my peripheral vision. I want to be enveloped if I'm going to go sit in a theater with a bunch of people and smell that stale foot odor. I don't know. Maybe things are better now.
Well, and it's like these people who make these films get to see them in private theaters.
Yeah, where nobody's been spilling shit or dropping their popcorn and stepping on it or candy everywhere. Spilling their drinks on seats.
And they don't have to worry about getting sick from sitting there for 3 hours at a time.
Yeah.
In recirculated air.
Wondering if, that high school student did his job properly and cleaned between all of the rows.
And they didn't.
They didn't, because he found somebody's shoe and you barely got it off the ground. It was stuck so well. Man, I found like whole, movie drinks aren't small either, but I found like whole ass movie beverages under chairs and whole bags of popcorn. Like whoever had those things went and refilled it the last 10 minutes of the movie and just left it under the seat. I mean, that's not even the kind of thing that I wouldn't even want to touch that, especially now. I'm not sure if that kind of thing even happens though anymore. Maybe the culture of movie theater goers has changed.
Maybe, I don't know. I haven't been, so I wouldn't know.
I'm trying to be optimistic about it, but I'm too cynical about it. I don't think that the movie theater goer culture has changed. I haven't read anything to lead me to that conclusion, except for movie theaters are closing. That's
When's the last time you went?
In Captain Marvel, when you recommended it before COVID.
I think that's the same for me, but which is where I'm like, I don't feel like the people who would have gone back are the type to be like, oh, I'm going to clean up after myself when I go out somewhere.
No,
I'm going to let, they're the type, I'm going to give somebody else a job. Me throwing this popcorn on the floor is giving someone else a job. If I didn't do this, somebody wouldn't have to sweep it up. Reality, it's kind of helping if I throw popcorn on the floor. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like restores it to the carbon chain.
Biodegradable.
Yeah, it's biodegradable. It's what plants crave. Wait, that's electrolytes. I would actually I would like to go to a movie theater. I would like to watch a movie on a giant ass screen. I only know one person who has a room big enough for that. Dennis. He's got a living room. Dennis and Leah have a living room that's substantially large on one wall. I've been trying to talk him into, getting a projector and a screen. And in incremental steps, of course, build out the whole thing so that he does eventually have a Dolby Atmos, a full 3D immersive surround sound experience type situation. Of all of my friends who are into movies, he has the biggest wall. I gotta emphasize, like, if I had a giant ass wall like that, I would be really tempted to get a projector, like, and utilize it just for that purpose. I would go to great lengths to make that room as dark as Sheila would hate it. But I think that's actually the best argument that I can think of for 8K or beyond is anyone who wants to have a screen that's, you know, over 100 inches. If they would have a 200 plus, a 240 inch screen, and they have a wall to facilitate that, that's definitely where 8K comes in handy, or 16K, or whatever kind of matrix of projection is necessary to cover it with optimal pixel density or projection density. I guess that's something to add to the list of goals. Have a giant wall big enough to facilitate projection, and and then build out the machine that can project that too. There's a lot of movies though that have take no benefit from a giant projection. They just don't have the framing. It doesn't have that sense of scale that requires a big projection. Like when everything's tight or within, I'm going to say 30 feet, you don't need a giant screen for that.
Video games can be overwhelming at that size. Like,
yeah.
I was playing a video game on a big screen, and I had to like pause just for a minute where I'm like, I'd been playing it on my, you know, I think it's like a 29 inch or whatever monitor, and going to the big screen TV, it's like a lot of information. it's the same information, but just magnified, where I'm like, I couldn't imagine the things that were happening on screen. I'm like, holy shit, if this was happening in the real world, it would just be paralyzing, because it's just too much. But the fact that it's, you know, on a 2-dimensional screen really, I guess, gives the brain just a little bit of reprieve to actually participate in it.
Wow. I'll be right back. And I'm back. So Sheila went to a Civil War reenactment down in Spring Mill. And I wasn't aware that there were any Civil War engagements in Indiana, but I guess there were. Let's see, what does the Google have to say about that? Corridon was the site of the Battle of Corridon. Okay.
Indiana must have just felt left out. Like, let's have a fight. Nowhere near the actual South, but we need to get involved in this.
It happened July 9th. You know, if there was a battle happening in Indiana in February, the middle of February, it would have involved a bunch of, or any kind of standoff. It would involve people just sitting around, huddled around tiny ass fires, wearing their thin ass wool blanket, complaining about how they were stuck out in the snow because there's like 6 inches of snow. That's probably less now. There was like 6 inches of snow in my yard after whatever the other day when it came down in like 2 hours. We went from no snow to holy crap, this stuff is thick. And then I decided to foolishly decided to go out for a drive, and there were just people off the side of the road everywhere. This isn't even the first snow that Bloomington's had, and it's like almost as if everyone had forgotten how to drive in the snow over the course of the last couple of weeks when it was nice. Lo and behold, it's still winter. We're still getting really crazy atmospheric conditions. The stuff going on in California seems to be unending because now they're getting mudslides. California is not going to break off into the ocean. It's going to wash off into the ocean.
People have been saying, not people, scientists have been saying that for a while now, but I didn't think it would happen this fast.
Yeah.
That shit is wild.
I lived in California. I went to like elementary school in California where we had earthquake drills, and they talked about that sort of thing. How it's gonna happen. The San Andreas fault line runs up and down the entire coastline. Like, this thing is not gonna go away.
Mm-hmm.
But I figured it'd be the kind of thing that I'd be real old by the time it's happening, like just getting started.
I didn't think they were just gonna start like having houses fall into the ocean though.
Yeah, like
just that shit is. It's like the type of dystopian end to that. Not the civilization, but that type of culture. And where I'm like good riddance to it, but some people want to hold on to it so bad. And I was just thinking about this last night at like 3 a.m. in the morning. Our fucking generation grew up being gaslit about the goddamn fucking, like, the environment. We're the ones that fixed the fucking ozone layer, and the people before us are so mad that they can't help but just try to fucking destroy the planet still. It's like,
hey, the fire's over, guys. Let's start partying again.
Right.
Fuck.
And they don't want to give us credit. Like, man, our generation started recycling and fucking, we didn't invent it, but we did it. And like, even though they're not actually doing anything and just burning it a lot of times or whatever, it's not actually much better than throwing it in the fucking landfill. At least we did it, and we weren't throwing trash out on the street out of our fucking car windows. So there's this element of our generation was the first one to start, first American Western one to start respecting the planet, and the people who are still around are now trying to double and triple down on that disrespect to the planet. And they're like rolling coal and fucking, putting oil in the ocean and corrects it on top of that if the pipelines burst, instead of just stopping, like. And then it's like, oh no, we can't use like hydropower. We gotta take it out of lithium and then fucking cobalt and do these other things that destroy the planet in these other ways. And it's like, man, they don't. There's no way they have to destroy the planet to continue technological progress. They just do it because we've been doing it. And that's where I'm like, in the way that poor countries that were recycling, quote unquote, our electronics, we're just stripping the electronics and repurposing all the metals. It's like, it seems like at this point, there's been enough production of electronics and all these other things that we shouldn't have to keep mining for new materials or stripping the planet, and we can just use what we already have out. And if it takes mining and stripping the planet, we shouldn't do it. And it's like philosophically, it's obviously a leap from where we are now as a society, but it's only something in that line of thought that's going to allow us to stop destroying our planet in order to exist, because it's so self-defeating, but we also sharing the planet with people who can't plan past their next meal, let alone trying to like figure out how we're going to save the planet. It's like we shouldn't involve those people in the conversation. Not to say that they wouldn't be capable eventually at some point, but they're not capable now because they don't want to be capable. They're not trying to be educated enough to discuss the climate or the environment in a way that should allow them as adults to be participating in the conversation. That's using democracy to destroy civilization is some like shit a cancer would do. And we have these cancerous people in our society that look like regular human beings in a way, but they've clearly become so hyper individualistic that they're actually a cancer on civilization. And it's like, I don't even hate to say it. It's more so I wish more people would acknowledge that civilization demands coexistence and hyper individualism doesn't work in the paradigm of coexistence. Like, you can be an individual, but hyper individualism is like a counterpoint to civilization. So the notion of having a nation of hyper individualistic people is just, it's nonsense. And on top of that, it creates this powder keg of a situation where all these hyper individuals inevitably think that they can do better than anybody else as a leader, because inevitably they'll think that they need to lead other people to be individuals. However that works, or in the same way you have these I don't know if you've seen the alpha male training seminars.
Wait, what? You can't. That's they're training people to be douchebags.
Yes, they're training effectively. It's like a seminar where you go and pay another man to show you how to be a better man that's more alpha and more of a man than you were before. And the idea of the people who end up going to these things also being voting citizens of the country, it's like, that's who we have to coexist with. So on the one hand, I understand that I have to coexist with them, but they don't understand coexistence. So then it makes it this weird, like, in that context, I don't have to be nice to them to coexist with them. I'm also going to go further and say I don't have to accept them into my paradigm of how I look at the world to coexist with them. There's ways to go about it without antagonizing them. And I don't think that they can do that same thing, which is why they end up becoming a problem for other people. And that's where there's plenty of things that people do that I don't agree with, that I don't go out of my way to try to stop them from doing. People on the right wing generally don't have that restraint, which is why other people have problems. And that's ultimately like I'm not talking about criminals or people who are mentally unstable who then can't really control their actions. Like today, I saw some guy who apparently has a problem specifically with Subarus because when I drove by, he like flipped my car off, and I'm like, that's aggressive. And I'm like sitting there, and I'm like, I don't understand. I didn't do anything. So I'm definitely not like trying to ask this dude why he has a problem with me. But then I saw him 5 minutes later, and another person driving the same car drove by, and he flipped that car off too, but didn't flip any other cars off. So I'm like, oh, this guy, for whatever reason, has a problem with people who, or the car. I don't know what it is, but those people also exist. And I'm not about like somebody is going to be really into their Subaru, but also not aware that this guy may have a problem that doesn't even have to do with them. And he's expressing it in a way that is going to come off antagonistic potentially to the individual when in fact it's at the collective of Subaru or whatever.
Yeah,
So
you know,
like,
I had a bad Subaru experience.
I don't know.
I don't like flip off Subaru owners. I don't disparage Subaru owners just because I had a
guy
lemon.
did.
That's like crazy to me. That's
I don't know why.
Ugh.
But again, it's like it doesn't. He may not potentially have a logical foundation for it. So that's where I'm like, I'm not trying to then go antagonize him.
Yeah.
And potentially make his existence worse because I'm now offended or I can't coexist with this guy who has a problem with Subarus and I happen to be driving a Subaru. So it's like, because I can actually coexist with that guy, we can coexist. But because he can't coexist with me, there's tension. So it only takes one person actually to coexist, as long as the person who doesn't want to coexist doesn't escalate the issue to violence or to some confrontation where I'm like, if he got to a point where I felt threatened, there's like a certain level of response where I'm like, I'm justified, but to take it to that level would be an inordinate and unnecessary level of response. And especially when I can just move away. So it's like, you know what I mean? The idea that like I would sit there and wait for this guy to like antagonize me into like harming him back in some way because I was justified because he was just aggressive and attacked me first. It's like, I get, yeah, those people, when they aggress or they become aggressive and take it to a point where it's like, yeah, you can now respond. I feel like the people who put themselves in those situations and allow it to go to that point are actually predators that just want to masquerade as like protectors, because if they tell that story the right way, it's going to sound like they were actually protecting people. But because they didn't just move away and de-escalate the situation by not letting it get to that point, they can frame it as if they somehow are protecting society from that person who's like only aggressive because that person allowed it to get to that point. And that's where I'm like, we have too many people who want to be vigilantes, not understanding that de-escalation is the first tool that should always be used in any situation. And that's something that you learn when you're actually disciplined and properly trained.
Yeah, disciplined and properly trained. Those are pretty big factors, I'd say. I don't think anyone is intuitive about discipline. Some people are more inclined to benefit from discipline, like a disciplined or guided study of something. But I don't think that's the kind of thing that's just like, it's not something that everyone just is born with. Some people develop incredible discipline, though.
Well, and it's also, I was thinking about this. It's also something that can only really be developed when there's this element of a person having some edge that they know that they can lean on and not leaning on that constantly. Because I think that's knowing how sports work. Obviously, you can't use one thing over and over unless it's just so much better than everyone else that it allows that person to then just lean on that. And I think knowing what I was doing in sports and in competition when I was participating, that's not when people are already above other people in certain areas, there's no challenge in just going in and knowing that you're better than those people in that certain arena. So then you start to add these meta games on yourself to bring the levels down to make it more fair. So then you might even lose, and they think that the game was fair, and so they enjoy it. And it doesn't matter to you because you know in your heart that you could have easily won if you hadn't done that. So it's not actually a knock on your ego. And in certain cases, people use that approach as a crutch because they know they're gonna lose, but they tell themselves like, "Oh, I'm just gonna play at 75%," and that's so. Not to say that that line of thought can't also be a mental crutch to protect one's ego from loss, but if you've already proven to oneself that you can be better or that you are better, that's when again it gets to this point. I think you can look at any sporting arena and people start to do what is the unexpected and start testing the waters once they get bored just winning. And I think there's a point where I think Michael Jordan's probably the best example when he's like, I'm gonna go try to play baseball. I'm gonna go try to play golf. And then I guess I'll go back to basketball now, but I'm old. So this is where the new challenge comes in, is because now I'm a 35-year-old man playing against these 21-year-old guys, 22, whatever they are. And, they all know my tricks, but will it still work? And yeah, it still worked to a degree, but people now at that point, people had 15 to 20 years of video to watch on him, and he had retired and he came out of retirement. So mentally, there's people that now have an edge on him, but that's to him another challenge. So there is, in being at the top, I don't think loss actually matters to people once they've established to themselves that they are winners. It's like, they can lose and it doesn't actually bother them that much. But for people who don't really have that inner confidence, that loss is so debilitating that those people then become dangerous potentially because they can't handle that type of loss because their ego is so dependent on proving themselves to other people that type of loss then becomes just unbearable in that their self-worth is based on other people's or their perceived value from other people's perspectives. And I see a lot of that happening with the people who claim to be hyper individualist because it's a confused viewpoint, obviously. But those people, I think, have, for what, for many varieties of reasons, I'm sure those people have no self-worth and are trying to establish it from a place where when they start doing it, it looks obvious to people like us, but they think in their stupid heads that people like us don't see through their charades. So it's like all these guys going to alpha male boot camp, they're going to assume in their stupid heads that people like us see them and we're just jealous because we can't pay for the alpha male boot camp. And that's what they're going to tell themselves, because the same ego padding that a person who really has confidence gets to use, those people can employ without actually having the basis for the confidence to actually employ those. So it's like they can get the appearance of confidence. Everybody who has confidence knows damn well those people are faking it, and they're dying inside when they see a person with actual confidence, and they would literally throw thousands of dollars at someone who they perceive with confidence to transfer some of that. If they can just like be in their proximity for long enough. I don't care if you treat me like a bitch. If you just treat me like a bitch for half an hour, maybe 3 hours, I don't know. Maybe that'll rub off on me, and then I'll be a more alpha male. And those people think like that.
But that's not how it works.
But that's how they think, which is hilarious. Where I don't really feel bad for them for getting grifted on that particular line. But when it's like just confidence and not like explicitly alpha male, I do feel bad for the people that get grifted. So it's like I don't lump all people who are trying to like improve themselves in the same group. It's definitely not all the same group. And like the Tony Robbins people, I don't think that's the same at all. Like,
no.
And I don't even think Tony Robbins is a grifter necessarily, but I think his story is crazy.
We're talking about the people who willed Sex Panther cologne into existence.
Oh my God! Yes, those people.
That's who we're talking about, because that stuff didn't have to exist. It was only a joke in fucking Ron Burgundy. In that Anchorman movie. It was just a joke. It was only supposed to happen once. It wasn't supposed to turn into an actual cologne.
Well, and I feel like Paul Rudd, this is the problem when you give someone who's supposed to give a character who's supposed to be an unlikable douchebag a sweetheart to play them. It's like Paul Rudd is a sweetheart. Anything he does, anybody's going to be, oh, it's Paul Rudd. That character should have not been played by Paul Rudd, because then at the end of that, you got people, oh, Paul Rudd's awesome. I want to be just like him in Anchorman. And now you got a bunch of people who are duped into thinking they should be like this character from Anchorman, because it had Paul Rudd's face and Paul Rudd's charisma attached to it. And that's where I'm like, no, you should not get fucking Zac Efron to play Ted Bundy. Don't do that. Don't do shit like that. Or like whoever, like don't get Brad Pitt to play John Wayne Gacy. Don't do that. Shit like that, where I don't know who decided, or Evan Peters to play Jeffrey Dahmer. Don't do that ever again. Don't do anything like that ever again. These types of decisions that put...
I'd actually be really cool if movies about serial killers were just never made.
Never made ever again. We don't need them.
We don't need them.
We don't need them. I don't know.
It's a weird, morbid thing.
Fictional or real.
Yeah.
Never again. But, freedom of speech and freedom of expression, I get it. But
I
it's like,
mean,
no, society has enough of those things already.
are
We
these
already
movies
know.
being produced by NPOs that are setting up trusts or foundations to help the family of the victims to, you know, put their lives back together after shit like this? Because I don't think that happens. I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen.
But also, I want to say it's the easiest genre because, and for various reasons, but when you look at the Disney IP hitting the mainstream, the first things to get spit out are these crap horror movies that
Oh yeah,
people end up watching.
Blood and Honey. That was so terrible. I'm not even gonna watch the Steamboat Willie
No, it's
one.
fucking. It's not meant to actually be watched. It's just a cash grab, and it's a fucking easy. It's the easiest way to make money because horror people have no taste in general. I mean, there are a few people who watch horror movies that have taste. Not to say there aren't like two or three of them out there, but in general, out of the like millions of horror fans, 99.99% of them don't have any taste.
You
They don't
know,
have any
we actually
like.
got a great Winnie the Pooh horror movie. It was called uh, Dale and Tucker versus Evil, or Tucker and Dale versus Evil, and it was two like bumbling hill folk, you know, surviving some really horrible shit. It didn't need to be a Winnie the Pooh story. We all knew it was Pooh and Piglet. There are just some things I think that's like, you know, obviously as you pointed out, it's a cash grab, but there's some things that just seem like, why? Who actually, the person that thinks this is a good idea? I have questions. Like, why is this a good idea? Of course, there's all those like C-list films that are released, you know, direct to streaming that are absolute crap that wouldn't have even passed as a B movie in the 80s. That's what I get for perusing streaming sites on the internet.
Did you go through some 80s movies? Or the opposite.
I found some movies that were nested in a bunch of 80s movies, but they're all new. Like there's this one that's like a Dance Dance Revolution in the post-apocalypse, like a dystopian future Dance Revolution gang warfare type story. It's pretty terrible. I think it's like Blast Revolution or something like that. At least the cheesy 80s movies, like, you know, they were riding skateboards and doing things, physical things that were like, you know, really complicated. In all of the scenes where these kids are dancing in front of a video game or stamping the pad, it's either waist up shots, you can't see what their legs are doing, or it's a shot of the controller interface that they're stamping their feet on, so you can't even tell what's on the screen. And like every low budget film, they don't have the framing right, so they're right up on the back of the shoulders of the protagonist, instead of framing like the entire room, because they can't get a whole ass room, because where are they going to find a room big enough to shoot in? Or enough light to light up that whole ass room? You know, I think it was House is the first TV show that was that they did everything with like a DSLRs with big lenses and big imaging sensors and in 1080p. So it was all really just lifelike, you know. And it was early on in the adoption of HD and in the broadcast of 1080p, I believe. And one of the things that I noticed about that series is that there were a lot of episodes that had really wildly different lighting. Like the white balance was not set at the beginning of the day, or they didn't correct through the whole day. They just left it. And so the person who had to do the color grading was dealing with, you know, composing a scene out of a period of shooting that lasts the entire day. And so there are periods where the light's just messed up because they're using as much natural or ambient light as possible. But this is different. This is like 4K cameras are just everywhere now, and there's no more like resolution barriers. Even the lenses don't matter that much anymore because of computational, like post processing. It's like the barriers to making movies got lowered, and that's all.
Well, and again, I think there's this individual who's hyper fixated on making content for themselves that's completely devoid of any meaning because they have no meaning and they are effectively just bumbling around existence with no direction. So these are the people who are like generating those images of a person staring out into nothing and are like, man, this is deep. And it's like, okay, it's just a person staring off into space. Or it'll be like a person sitting with a robot staring and the robot's staring. And it's like, oh, this is deep, man.
Yeah, that's like the future version of man's best friend is a robot now.
But that's not even that's too much meaning, bro.
Oh, yeah.
You've already like put too much meaning. No. That's like some sort of artistic interpretation. Like, no, they have no meaning here. This is just like a picture of a man and a robot staring. And it's like, then you realize all the prompts are using the same sort of like, obviously they're either staring at the camera, doing 3/4 or whatever.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's always the same stare. So it's either staring off into the right or up into the left. And it's like
the AI generated images that I've seen that are the best at approaching the uncanny valley, as close as they can get, 99%. My understanding is that those images are created with like mile-long prompts. They get really specific, and then the negative prompt is just as complicated. I mean, you'd think you wouldn't have to be like no extra fingers or no extra teeth.
No, man, and that's where I'm like, even the progress that's been made so far, it's still using stolen work.
Yeah.
So all of this progress is only possible because of theft. This is the most neo-colonialist shit that's ever happened. And the fact that the digital world was created in a way to it wasn't created for this reason. But in the process of the digital world being created, they made other ways to disenfranchise poor and non-white minorities, made it a playground for the rich again, even though digital space is not limited by fungibility, but they tried to reintroduce fungibility into the digital space just so rich people could go in there and dominate again. And now we're at a point where they're trying to make it so that rich people can own the means of fucking automating digital space only so they can go fucking steal shit and have their platforms be paid for.
So,
nah, man.
So an AI artist would have to run their self-hosted AI based image generation system in a essentially in an air-gapped environment so that it's no longer able to get any kind of external stimulus for its.
You mean like Sony did for Across the Spider-Verse 2?
Yeah.
Oh, so Sony did?
Yeah.
Oh, it's possible?
That's what I mean. Like one would have you would have to build their own large language model and have it completely isolated from the rest of the internet. Like, meaning its output, it has to be transferred to a different machine before it can ever get out of its own little sandboxed, air-gapped environment, so that it's not influenced by anything else.
Damn.
I mean,
So
it
I guess when
sounds
people were outraged at the Spider-Verse artists, they were wrong
yeah,
and probably shouldn't have lumped them in with other AI
yeah,
people because Sony artists were able to do this because they understood that because they're artists, they don't want somebody stealing their work. So they need to go in and train the fucking models themselves
yep,
on their own work that they generated themselves. So it's not theft. And their model works better because it was specifically made for one fucking purpose
yeah. It was
instead
fine
of
tuned from the
generating.
get go to do the exact thing that they wanted to do. They didn't have to filter through, I don't know, 20 hours of Will Smith eating spaghetti.
uh man. So on the
Like, he
one
should have been
hand,
mad
I'm not
about, like, all the things that he's been mad about in the last year or whatever. He should have been kind of upset about that. That should have been like, man, I don't look like that when I eat spaghetti.
I'm not anti AI. I'm anti theft and I'm
Yeah.
anti colonialist. And this iteration of what is being called artificial intelligence or algorithmic intelligence is just theft. That's all it is at scale, what they're doing right now.
Yeah, and the limited, uh, isolated group of AI artists who are genuinely creating their own content to feed into their large language model. That group is silent, largely silent, and unfortunately, they're getting the same, you know, criticism from that colonialist AI creatives are getting, which is unreasonable. But we can't. It's hard for the average person to identify really good AI, to distinguish really good AI or even really good CGI from reality at times, at least in digital content. And so I think it's a bigger stretch to expect that same audience to be able to identify when the AI artists are using their own content to create their model or not. Because it all seems like magic. Here, I'm going to enter these 25 words here and another 16 over here and press go and bada bing, bada boom. It might as well be magic. But I think that's it. I think that's the key, is that any AI artist would have to build their own machine. They would have to do that. They would have to invest whatever it is just to get, like, up and rolling, to get functional. They don't have to compete with Sony in terms of raw computing power because, I mean, Sony manufactures computers, so of course they can make their own AI machine.
It's funny, yeah, thinking about it, that's what when they were making PS3s, the military, or was it NASA? One of them was
It
buying
was
them up.
the Air Force
Yeah.
because because they had like a parallel processing
Oh,
architecture that was
yes,
they could
that's
load
right.
into a Beowulf
They could
cluster.
load them together.
Yeah, they could
Yes.
run a Beowulf cluster out of PS3s because the PowerPC architecture that they were utilizing was designed to be scaled in parallel. And for those that aren't aware of what a Beowulf cluster is, it was this old system of integrating many computers. It was used by like SETI. If you wanted to help do SETI calculations, you run their Beowulf cluster software. You build a machine to run it, and then it just sits there. And it was like one of the earliest distributed computing models. And but it's also a functional platform to build things. Like, I'm pretty sure that like RenderMan is like a variation of a Beowulf cluster, and the like there was another. It was probably DreamWorks. They had their own system that was very similar. Like, conceptually, they were all Beowulf clusters, big multi-headed computational machines. You don't need that crap anymore, though. We don't need any of that stuff anymore. Those computers are so old now. Like The stuff we've got today is so far beyond what I ever would have imagined when I was just a teenager or even in my early 20s.
And it's all used for porn. That's it.
Yeah. Porn and Call of Duty.
Right. That's the games have, man. I feel like we need a cultural reset because people have been inundated with things, so they stopped being judicious with their dollars, and then companies started trying to play into that and just put out a bunch of shit thinking they could like make anything and people would buy it and then not have any quality control and just keep everything moving as if it wouldn't just come to a grinding halt. And I think we've gotten to the point where people are not really buying anything because they can't afford to just throw their money. So it's more and more difficult for a company to come in there and in that marketplace and throw some crap and have it hit the wall and stick. So they have to actually put more money into things, but they can't decide the correct things to put the money into. They're like, oh no, let's put fucking $300 million into Ezra Miller. But this Batgirl movie, scrap it. Fucking Tom Cruise, let's put $1 billion into him or whatever, but this Barbie movie, I think we'll take a risk on it. I don't know. It's gonna be a huge gamble. I don't know. Then Barbie ends up outselling Tom Cruise. So it's like the notion of where investment can go to it feels like when cocaine was flowing, Hollywood was able to just launder money and make a movie around it. And they were just like, oh, we're gonna have to like put something on the books to cover up all these cocaine sales. Let's like make a movie and let's do a bunch of cocaine while we make the movie. We can make the movie faster if we do all the cocaine. And it's like that to me it seems like, I'm not gonna say just Canon Films, but when you have a movie studio that's famous for making bad films that kept making bad films somehow, where you're like, how did they, I don't know how they pulled it off on this budget, but they barely pulled it off. And this shouldn't be in a theater. I don't know why I'm watching this film in a theater. This should definitely be on HBO or Showtime or Cinemax or something on the weekend with these special effects. You can't even call them special effects at the time where, the fact that some of those movies made it in is why I think we end up getting like the Wonder Woman 1984s now, where some executive still thinks you can just push through some poor CGI or Madam Web.
Oh, I don't even know anything about that.
God. Oh my God. I haven't seen it. Like I've seen pieces of it. And the reason I'm not going to see it is because everybody who's seen it so far, it definitely, like they say they feel dumber, but I believe them. I believe that they got dumber by watching that film, where it's like certain things, you can't get your life back after you saw it. And it's like, you can't undo certain things, where I'm like, it's not going to traumatize a person, but I can't unsee Morbius. I saw Morbius, and like, even though I didn't pay for it, like the fact that I actually sat down and watched that film, I can't undo that out of my psyche to know that like a film that bad was made and executed and greenlit and made to production to the point where I'm like, it's not even about, like, forget about Batgirl being scrapped. Morbius It
It's
never
Morbin
should have been
time.
made, and it never should have been re-released from Sony getting trolled into re-releasing it by people who were making fun of it and Sony not understanding the joke, thinking people really love the film and re-releasing it and losing even more money. So that I didn't get a headache, but like explaining the Morbius episode made my brain twitch where I'm like, I can feel myself getting dumber just thinking about Morbius and thinking about the plot and thinking about fucking Jared Leto, his method acting, and thinking about what the people on set had to go through when he wouldn't break character after they yelled cut and he would keep method acting and make everybody continue to wait for him to get through his method acting even though they weren't filming. All that shit I know based on watching other people try to express what I can only assume is the loss of part of their soul on video is like it feels like The Ring where there's like this video and people are like, oh, if you watch this video you die, and everybody's like, ooh, this can't be real, this is like, it's got to be some urban legend. And then in the movie, because this is where I feel like The Ring it's a thriller and it doesn't rely on gore, so I can't even really call The Ring a horror film. And I don't know if it was like the last good thriller or what, but when you're able to build a myth like that,
It had jump
that's what it
scares.
feels like. There's jump scares, but there's not a lot of gore.
And
So
then
that's where
there was like the one scene where the guy like very rapidly deteriorates. That was kind of freaky. It wasn't gory. There was no
right,
blood.
yeah, that's why
It was definitely scary.
That's why it's definitely like a thriller. So
Yeah. No, I think it crosses the line into supernatural horror, just barely. It does it just enough to let you know that it's a supernatural story.
I only think it does that because it's scary. Or when you watch it in a theater, it like makes your heart rise no matter who you are. Even if you don't get jump scared, like your heart's pounding when you watch that film, which is where I'm like, it definitely
it has a great
feels
soundtrack.
like a horror movie because it makes you scared. But I don't like, again, it's just not.
Well, that film has a really, really good soundtrack. Like they went to great lengths to emphasize like ringing pitches that cause anxiety and then dialing them just below the threshold of audibility, but still within the realm of perceptibility. And so they're doing all these things with modulating pitches that are just make you uncomfortable. It's brilliant.
Well,
I mean, it's a real
I feel like,
creative sound design team.
but it's also one of the most creative uses of the frame in a film in a while, where I want to say, I don't care who you are, the most memorable part of that film was when the girl breaks the frame, and that's like the most dissonant image because people are like not used to the fourth wall being broken, and especially the fourth wall being broken for the character that you're watching while simultaneously making it feel like your fourth wall is being broken. Like you're sharing the same feeling as the person in the film watching the film, which is very difficult to pull off.
Yeah.
So that's where that feeling of being the person in the film watching the film is exactly what it's meant to do, which is why it feels so fucking scary. So that to me is why I don't really put it in like a horror gore. Like it doesn't lean on.
It's definitely not gore
because it uses the breaking of the fourth wall as its main tool to fuck with the viewer. And it's like it doesn't by the end of the film, it doesn't desensitize you to it because it uses it sparingly. You're more sensitive to it by the end of the film. So then, and I think it's partially because the more they do it, the more they draw it out, and the more it gets drawn out, the more you can anticipate it, and the more you can anticipate it, the more you realize the pain and the terror is in the anticipation. Because once it crosses the threshold, then they speed it up, and that's when they use that. Like once the threshold has been crossed, you only have like a half second to actually use that terror, which is why they use it perfectly. In that, I don't know. I know they
Man,
made
that
sequels.
reason
I don't
can
know if
never.
they used it that well.
That story worked out so well because they still had landlines, and when that movie was released in the United States, the
VHS,
U.S.
for that matter.
Yeah, and on VHS. Like, and when it was released, you could still rent VHS, and you could still find landlines in people's houses. I had a landline in my apartment then when that movie came out. Actually, right after leaving the theater and getting home, I got a phone call, and I stood there and paused for a second. Wait, it was just a movie.
Everybody did.
Yeah.
Everybody did.
Everyone.
Which again, that's what I mean. Like,
Well
that
done, movie
film
maker.
was transcendent in ways that I don't know if any other film has really been able to pull it off since. But again, that's because the main tool was breaking the fourth wall, which again, not many films are able to do, or lean on something that's not gore to terrify somebody. So, I I can't even really think of any other film that has been able to do it that well. Um, Inception actually gets really close, but I don't think they're going for horror so much as like that's why I still feel like Inception's a thriller, which that um that category I think works really well for like heart pounding, intense action or intense story that it may border on supernatural, but it doesn't always have to be supernatural.
I think Inception is 100% a psychological thriller because it takes place in a dream.
Yeah, definitely. It's not like a horror thriller.
I mean, it's definitely got some nightmare. It's definitely got some nightmare level shit going on.
Oh, for sure.
Oh man,
I mean, like literal nightmare level.
Literal nightmare level stuff going on the whole time. But I think it's definitely a psychological thriller in that regard because it all takes place inside the mind. Inception's a really fun story too. Like it was one of the years ago once we started getting really good CGI, I started wondering like I wonder when we're gonna finally get some like zero gravity kung fu. And we've gotten examples of fighting in zero gravity more recently, but Inception was the first time that I ever saw like a protracted fight scene where there was no gravity because they were falling the whole time, and that was really cool. Like watching Joseph Gordon-Levitt like kicking off of the wall, flying at the dude, hitting each other in midair and swirling because hey, they're not standing on anything. There's no gravity. They're falling. That was really cool. They did a really good job with that part. The whole going into the dream inside of a dream and getting lost part, that was a little heavy-handed. But, I still give that movie like a solid, like almost A+.
So I feel like we may have hit peak cinema in terms of crossing the storyline with abstract editing expression. And that is close to the peak. And I feel like the scene in what is it, Far From Home, where Spider-Man's fighting Mysterio and his like powers are going crazy and he has to like hone in on them to get back into the dominant place in battle, even though it's a Spider-Man film, I feel like that's like
But
if
isn't it a
it,
Night Monkey film?
I mean, it can be both, but if the Matrix was the start of the visual, like the modern film visual revolution, like that Spider-Man film is like the peak, like Inception is close to the peak, Doctor Strange is even closer to the peak, but that Spider-Man film is like where storyline and abstract edits meet at the top, and then
Yeah.
from everywhere, for everything else feels like it's downhill from there. And
So
I don't.
Into the Spider-Verse to me was this giant wash of, I felt like I was watching a toilet flushing, even though the story was really good. And like the fight with Kingpin was fantastic. But it was just, oh man, I
Too
like
much
light shows. It
stimulation.
was too much. It was sensory. It was a visual stimulus overload. And it wasn't like nausea inducing. It didn't give me vertigo. It didn't give me a seizure or anything like that. It was just like, okay, this is just, how many colors can they flash at me with
Well,
it?
right. There's no cohesion, and I think that's. I don't know if you've seen Batman Ninja, but I was thinking about it, and
But that's a
I,
different variation on the theme. That one is brilliant.
of course, but that specific iteration of the character with also that style of animation, it's so bright and chaotic, but there's also a cohesion to it that I think other things try to mimic, but they don't get to that elevated level of having all of those colors and the cohesion that makes Batman Ninja what it is. And that's
Batman
where I'm
Ninja
like,
has one of the most impressive Jokers ever. He built a freaking wooden giant robot and almost smashed
yeah, that
Batman with
story
it. That
didn't
story's
end up being,
incredible.
it is, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be when I first started watching it. So I was like very, by the end of it, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm here for this. But it took me a while to actually watch it because I thought it was just like yet again another cash grab where it's just like, oh, take Batman, make it anime, fucking feed it into the prompt, and now this is what we got. But it wasn't that at all, and you could tell it was a labor of love. But I don't. It's harder, and is it becomes more and more difficult to discern those things because we're just flooded with so much shit. So I think I've seen it twice now. Like I may go back and watch it again, but it's got enough rewatch value because human eyes were laid upon it in the first place, whereas AI stuff, you see it once and it's like, okay, do I need to see that? Did I need to see this in the first place? Do I need to see this again? No. And to be fair to AI, there's a lot of human created art that is like that as well. Um, Went to the Chicago Art Museum, fucking saw Dave Batista there randomly.
That's cool.
Yeah, he was on a date, so I didn't like take pictures or go up to him and be like, "Dude, you were awesome in Guardians of the Galaxy" or some dumb shit. Um, but it was interesting to see a random celebrity there because I feel like that type of thing is that's the type of occurrence people need to get more engaged with art. Like all the kids that saw him there are gonna go tell their friends, and then now their friends are gonna like go pretending they're not gonna want to try to see somebody famous, but on that day it may be like Kanye or something, or it may be somebody else that they see at the art museum on a random day, and then they can tell that story. So it's like if that's what it takes to get kids into art, that's fine. Um, so I'm not like I don't I don't hate notion of like influencer culture or like fame as much as older people do. I hate when people are indiscriminate about listening to famous people, but I don't think kids have that problem. So I don't think it's that big of a deal, which is where I'm like, you know, it was funny to see like also not many people above a certain age know who Batista is, let alone like he could walk around an art museum fairly unbothered because not like the crowd that's going into the art museum isn't also watching Marvel movies, which is sad, but that's also where those people want to create this like hierarchical gap between this is not cinema if there's superheroes. And it's like, yeah, it don't have to be cinema, but like I said, I would put um I'm a comic book nerd, but I also really like movies that aren't comic book movies. Spider-Man Far From Home just happens to have one of the best sequences where I'm like, anybody who acts like that, if anybody watches the whole film and then sees that sequence and isn't impressed, fuck them. I don't care about that person's opinion. Like that person has no concept of anything. So I don't really like if a person comes to that conclusion after watching it, they don't have to think it's the best sequence of all time, or like they don't have to agree with me that it's peak cinema. But if a person's like, I'm not impressed with this, fuck that person specifically. So that's where I'm like, there's certain things where if I hear something, I'm like instantly willing to write off a person's opinion about that thing. Like I I don't okay, but just because I disagree with someone, I won't necessarily write off their opinion. And so like for example, there was a discussion this weekend about different types of pizza, and it's like one of the people had different preferences. I'm not going to write off that person's opinion about pizza just because they have a different preference. And it's like, I'm not necessarily going to listen to that person for suggestions for places to go, but I may take that person's opinion and try to reflect, oh, if they don't like this, I might like this because they don't like these things, but I like these things. That's completely different than if somebody's favorite pizza is Pizza Hut pizza, I don't take any pizza suggestions from that person as an adult. There's nothing wrong with Pizza Hut, but if that's your actual favorite pizza as an adult, like that person might as well be a child to me with a completely underdeveloped palate where again, I'm not taking food suggestions from someone with an underdeveloped palate. Just not going to do it. Like if somebody's favorite food is chicken wings or chicken nuggets and fucking hot dogs that aren't not, you know what? There's no gourmet hot dog that's good enough to be someone's favorite food as an adult. Sorry. If that's someone's favorite food as an adult, I'm not listening to them. Which
So I've had it was called a filet dog. It was made out of ground filet mignon. It was a $12 hot dog. It was absolutely delicious.
Still a hot dog.
But it's still a hot dog. I still put A1 on it. It tasted beefy, but it still had hot dog texture. It was a hot dog. And I love hot dogs, but I'm not going to say that, the filet dog in no way is comparable to an actual steak, other than like the rumor of flavor that it possesses within its casing. It's a good rumor, though. Not gonna lie.
My thing is like, there's certain foods where gourmet tries to take it and like elevate it.
One of them.
I mean, and even like something like pizza, where I
like
you
a
can have
fancy
the
pizza
most
too.
gourmet pizza, the most fancy. It's still a fucking pizza. It
Yep.
was meant to be this thing, and trying to turn it into something it's not just doesn't work. It doesn't actually work unless people like allow themselves to be diluted into, that's some emperor's not wearing anything type shit to me.
Yeah.
Um, and I, not to say gourmet food doesn't exist, but the gourmet is in the preparation, in the quality of the food, and in the time spent developing the concept of the dish and the execution of it. So it's not like, people who do that aren't worth the amount that they're asking for, but just making something arbitrarily expensive on top, even more expensive than it should be, to then try to elevate it above success is like, I think what a lot of high end quote unquote places end up doing, and it's not really necessary. Because if the food is good and it's actually gourmet, then it doesn't even really matter what people are wearing or what the environment looks like. People are gonna fucking pay for that shit, and that's why I've gotten really irritated with the dress up notion of like high end places. Like we went to a steakhouse, a Brazilian steakhouse, and people wearing like hoodies and fucking, a bunch of people were just clearly just came from work or just came from like home and weren't trying to like make it seem like this is some fancy restaurant because it's expensive. And that's when I'm like, this is great in terms of the food is already good. It's already costly. Like people don't need to like play this extra level of dress up. Cause then there was this couple, they stood out because the couple was wearing all white. I don't know what made them think it was a good choice.
Dinner
to wear all
cosplay.
white to a fucking steakhouse.
To a Brazilian steakhouse at that.
Yeah.
Like of all the
Where I'm like,
steakhouses, like when they bring it out on tiny ass swords, like you're not supposed to be wearing a giant napkin.
oh my God. Of all things.
The only place where it would be worse would be like a barbecue joint that has like, their sauce is a mop, not an actual sauce.
Yeah,
but like
Jesus Christ.
a dripping
That's
mop barbecue. Well, it just occurred to me that dinner cosplay is a thing, and like if it were up to me, I would go out to eat wearing the most comfortable thing possible. So that's probably like pajamas and a t-shirt. But I realize that that's not acceptable. We can't go out in our pajamas. Like you can only get away with that until you're like, I think 12 as a male human, and I think that female humans can get away with it into their like middle 20s. But who wants to wear a tuxedo to a restaurant? That's asking for so many problems later.
Or just wait until you dress to go out. How about that? How about that? That's a real simple solution to not wearing sleeping clothes or sweat, like the sweats out and turn like, I used to do it, but it's like, man, if I'm not ready, I'll just sit at home in my fucking robe,
Yeah.
and not go out until I'm ready to put clothes on and go out.
Yeah.
And then it's like, no, I'm never in public looking like an asshole because I just wait. I can sit at home and look like an asshole.
Yeah.
Oh shit, I have crust in my eyes. I have crust on my face because like whatever. I like drooled when I was asleep. Who cares? Because I'm not out in public.
Yeah.
I can just sit like that and just like not worry about what my face looks like until I'm ready to clean up, and then I'll go out. And so,
But that doesn't mean you have to like put a suit on.
of course, I mean, yeah, definitely not like
Unless
I'm
you're
not
going
gonna
to
be
like,
the asshole wearing a suit to the podcast.
what if it's like a crab, one of those like, all you can eat table crab things where people show up and that kind of thing. You'd want to wear like a swimsuit and a bib because you're gonna get covered in crab and you're gonna get just and lemon juice and buttery garlic drizzle, whatever. There are hammers flying all over the place. That's an environment where I can see somebody putting on like the actual costume would make sense. Getting dressed for that occasion. But I don't have very many opportunities to go do that. I've only seen imagery of that in like places like Florida.
No, man, it's funny. Like, I was at an event that wasn't for me. It wasn't my field, and I was basically there just to enjoy myself. And like, I didn't dress up, not to like, I wasn't wearing clothes with holes in them or anything. But it was like, I'm not trying to network, so I don't really feel it wouldn't even be appropriate to be dressed up because then people are going to start coming up to me thinking I'm like here for the event. So it's like being in that mindset while also seeing all the people who are like wearing their suits with food in front of them that they're not wanting to touch because they don't want to get like crumbs on their mouth or have food in their mouth when somebody's trying to talk to them. It's like, oh my God, I don't have that social pressure right now. And I'm going to fucking enjoy this.
They
And
don't
I
want to
was
mess
like,
up their makeup.
oh, exactly.
Yeah,
Because when
they've
you're
got
in
makeup
that
on.
situation and like other people potentially are going to be professionals that are also in your field or people who you might want to connect with for whatever reason because they're tangential in your field, it's like you can't sit there and eat some fucking ribs and like lick your fingers and like then down a beer as if you would when you're comfortable. And I get that, which is where I'm like, oh, I don't have the like looking around and seeing everybody having it and not feeling it. I was like, oh my God, this is like, I'm going to enjoy this moment because it's not often I get to be in this scenario and actually not feel that social pressure. And so like it was like when if you're a work ox and suddenly you realize you don't have a yoke on and you're like, oh my God, I can jump really high. And it's like all these years of like having this weight on your shoulders and not suddenly having that weight. And you don't know when that weight came off, but you just realize that weight isn't there. It was like I totally felt like whenever they're like Red Bull gives you wings, it was like that realization moment where I'm like, oh my God, I feel weightless. Like it was really, Chicago weed isn't great, but the weed I finally found there was good enough where I'm like, I'm feeling in the moment. I've got a good buzz going, but also this realization. It was like, it was a very magical moment for me. And like, I just got to sit there and eat a burger and not have to like worry about anything. And in the moment, it was so zen and it only lasted for like 30 seconds because and the funny thing was, I'm like, as soon as I know, as soon as I get to this moment, somebody's going to like not understand what's happening here. Not even, maybe not even out of the sake of them not being able to get it, but to them, there's no way in hell somebody would be in this room not trying to network right now. Surely this guy wants to network. And so like I knew it would only be a matter of time before someone got that idea or something in that line. And sure enough, it was like about 30 seconds, maybe a minute later. But it's like I know everybody in that room, no one was able to achieve that zen because they were all put in this mindset by the fact that everybody was like dressed up, or not super dressed up, but like enough to where it's like, okay, this is my reputation. I'm bringing potentially my institution's reputation into the room. So I have to like, make sure my makeup's good, make sure I don't have crumbs in my mouth, fucking all this shit to make sure. And in that, it's like that social pressure that some people, not because not everybody carries it, but that social pressure that some people carry in those situations, it's like, I don't even know who, it's not any individual who brings it into the room. It's like everybody brings it in on themselves. And that's where it's like, again, the only reason I'm even dissecting it now is because I'm trying to figure out how it even happened, where I'm like, how, not because I feel like there's always a chance if you're at a certain level of academia or like professional skill, you can like always make something happen. But that's where I'm like, that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to do that. And going in without that, like I didn't have any business cards. Like I couldn't even have given out a business card if I wanted to, because I didn't take any with me. Like that's not what I was trying to do. So like not going into a scenario where you can do that and still deciding like not to do that, I feel like it felt anti-capitalist in the moment, in that like I have this opportunity that anybody who wanted to like elevate themselves, like, oh, I'm around all these people, like let me seize this opportunity to capitalize and like try to push myself, even though they're not exactly in my field, I can make this work. And it's like any type of person who's raised in this culture is generally like not given a moment to just breathe and like not put yourself on the market. Like you don't have to fucking constantly be trying to sell yourself as a person, even though that's what this paradigm wants people to think. It's like if you're not trying to monetize something, or if you have a hobby, have you started broadcasting that on YouTube or Twitch? Or are you putting that on Etsy? It's like, no, man, just fucking enjoy some shit. Just enjoy some shit. Just sit back, eat your fucking burger. Don't take a picture of it and put it on Instagram. Don't take a picture of it and put it on Snapchat. Just eat it. Just enjoy it and fucking swallow it and enjoy that experience. But if somebody's not monetizing it, then what happened? Did you really enjoy that burger if nobody monetized it? And like this notion of things not really being important unless somebody else values it enough to give you money to validate that thing. That's where it felt like I was briefly free of that paradigm. And even when that person started talking to me, it didn't feel like they were bringing that back. It was almost like they were just curious, like, what's this person even doing? Like, I think they were confused about me more than anything. Like, what is this person? Like, they probably couldn't understand because they probably hadn't seen that before. I'm sure out of any conferences that they've been to in the last 10 years, there's no way that somebody who's been there just enjoying themselves, not trying to network, not trying to talk to somebody, and just eating something. And just,
yeah, they'd be like,
because that doesn't happen.
Yeah, they'd be like, what do you do? It's like, what are you here for? Oh, you're just here. How did you even get in here?
Exactly. That's how it started. Because then I had to explain. I'm like, oh, my partner is, she's actually a person that does things in this field, and I'm her partner, and
I'm just here.
That's how the conversation started, where I'm like, that person was clearly confused because it's like, how did you? Because also I think everybody had name tags and I didn't have a name tag, which is also where again it's like I could have gotten a fucking name tag from not necessarily the conference one. I could have just gotten one of those make your own name tags if I was really trying to get people to like come talk to me. Hey, Chris, how's it going? What do you do? What do you in? Let's work on something. No,
Yeah,
that's not why I'm here.
badges are
So
easy to get
I'm
made.
not trying to like put a name tag on because again, I'm not trying to be rude. It's just the name tag creates this it's like a window that I wasn't even trying to open. So I'm like, no, that window's closed right now. Because I've seen other people walking around with name tags and I can't approach them the same way I can with somebody who's wearing a name tag. And I can like take a quick peek and, oh, this person's name is blah, blah, whatever. And now I can be like, hey, I don't know you, but I got your attention because your name is right here. So it's like that type of access to a person's attention, I didn't give it out, so I wasn't like also gonna like take advantage of other people who put themselves out there to then try to get into conversations and just leverage my way into conversations to just be there. And so like I think it's really hard for people to do that for what, for various reasons, whether it's, social anxiety even does that, where it's like, I don't know what to do with my hands right now. So I'm going to start twiddling my thumbs. And then now the twiddling the thumbs, the nervous energy is not directed enough. So now I'm going to start talking to the person next to me. Hey, how's it going? And then suddenly that person's nervous energy gets so redirected. And now 4 people are in a conversation about something that none of them care about because this one person's nervous. That's fine. That stuff doesn't even really bother me so much as like when people get in those situations and then try to like turn it into an exchange that there has to be some sort of like outcome, then it becomes like something completely different. And I think that's where going to enough tech conferences and seeing where like all those places are just all vultures and no substance. And there's constantly people trying to like get in and get information and sort of scout and see what's going on with an individual, and they're not even hiding it. There's no warmth to it. It's very cold. It's like they almost want you to impress them even though they're the ones trying to be a vulture on you, where that culture it's like the absolute worst incarnation of it. But seeing like
oh man, so you just gave me a glimpse into the future of tech conventions. People are going to be walking around with their ID badge. It's just going to have a QR code, and they're going to look at them through their augmented reality lobotomy glasses, and they'll have all the information they need. They won't even need to talk to each other. They'll just sit there and like passively, gaze in a direction while they read everything about somebody.
Yeah, Google tried that, and everybody raged.
Yeah. but Apple did it now, so it's going to get adopted. Vision. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, people are returning those devices, which I find
until they break.
Hilarious.
They like fall off of their coffee table onto the floor a whole 16 inches and they break.
$3,500 paperweight.
It's not nearly as bad as a stainless steel truck that rusts.
Oh my God.
When you shared that shit, man, I was like having this really weird laugh, chuckle thing going on, and then I inadvertently choked on some saliva in the process. I had some Schadenfreude in full effect. Anyone who buys a $135,000 stainless steel truck and doesn't go through the absolute like full regimen of keeping that thing clean they're in for a really horrible surprise when that thing starts getting stained by all of the chemicals that are on the road that are kicked up by everyone else's tires.
That's if they keep it long enough without severing their fingers
Oh God,
in the doors.
that shit's so fucked up. Freaking finger guillotine. Oh, I watched the video of the carrots, and all I could think was like, yeah, a carrot's way tougher than a finger.
Yeah, right. You know, oh my God. So, this might be one of the most poorly designed vehicles in modern history, which is where
this vehicle
it just gets worse. Everything about this vehicle, you find out it's like it. You think it can't get worse, and then it does.
You know, normally when vehicles survive the chopping block, they don't take it with them. Like,
well, and this is not the first Tesla vehicle that puts people's fingers at risk of being lost. And
that's right, the Model X.
Yeah, and I guess when the last winter hit, because the the door handles automatically retract. When the door was getting frozen
Who just
shut,
clamp their hands.
And I don't feel bad for those people. I feel bad that someone had to learn that type of lesson that way. But for the individuals, it's like, man, they should have like had better parents or something. Because I feel like the only way you end up in that situation is if you don't have a good father figure or a good mother that's there to like love you. And then you end up trying to go at Elon Musk and throw money at him to make him aware of your existence. And you end up with this shitty product. And you keep having to defend it with your life and your life savings.
And your
you just
wallet.
need somebody to love.
Oh, man.
But you can't buy love in capitalism, unfortunately. And that's the big lie that they won't tell the truth about.
I wonder how many people are going to actually lose a finger, though. You think it'll be enough
It won't be zero.
I know it won't be zero. It'll be more than zero. Definitely more than zero.
We know that. The issue is,
I wonder how many. How many before they were? Yeah, how many digits will be required before an extreme revision to the design of the access points of this vehicle, and like the tailgate too, apparently, because it's also a freaking finger guillotine. It's not a bad name for it though, the guillotine. Has a good ring to it.
So every year, about 30,000 people in the U.S. lose a finger to doors and power tools.
Yeah, but with all those power tools, I bet those people were wearing gloves. And with every car door, I bet they're not wearing gloves.
So in 2019, Tesla blamed a child for getting her finger crushed in the door. Yeah, because a 5-year-old is at fault for getting her finger crushed.
Wait, can 5-year-olds be held liable like for that kind of thing?
I mean,
like really?
Tesla thinks so.
If that's like, God. What's with Tesla and endangering children? Got to buy shitty ass conflict batteries for years, a decade, until they finally decide to switch to a different matrix, chemical matrix. I can't really complain about it because I'm not their target audience. I like driving vehicles. I don't understand. I just don't see the appeal of a self-driving car. Maybe I need to like Maybe I need to be chauffeured around to truly appreciate it. But even then, I don't trust other people driving me around enough to let a computer drive me around either. At least not yet. Maybe if everyone was riding around in a car that was being operated by like a computer system that can communicate with everything around it on the road within a reasonable range. But even then, if we can't trust like the AIs that are being developed now, how are we supposed to trust one driving our car?
But also, if I don't know if you've seen the videos, if table saws can have fucking finger protection,
Oh yeah, those things are
that's
actually really incredible. That whole like
super accurate.
it's funny. I've seen
The
videos where
Tesla
people try
has
to
no
debunk that
excuse.
stuff where they're like, yeah, we can cut a whatchamacallit, a hot dog in half with this saw. And then of course when they show the test, the person's holding it with the glove, so the hot dog isn't actually grounded.
Mm.
Because you have to wear a strap when you use those table saws, so if the circuit completes, it can hit the brakes really hard and only cut you instead of lop your finger off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if a table saw can stop itself from like taking a finger or a hand, then a Tesla door should be able to stop itself from crushing and taking a finger or hand.
Yeah, it's really that simple. It's really that simple. Actually, there's no rationalizing around that comparison because, again, we've seen the videos. Those fucking table saws can hit a goddamn hot dog and just shut off. So
And barely scratch the hot dog.
yeah, barely. It nicks it. It nicks it. It totally nicks it. But no more than a nick.
But you can't be wearing gloves.
Which again,
You shouldn't be using gloves on a table saw anyways, because that's how most people lose their fingers on table saws is gloves.
mm,
Because their shit gets hung up on the wood they're passing across the table, and they don't realize it, and they're pushing with the other hand because that's what you do when you're using a table saw. You push the wood, and oh shit, you can't get your hand out of the way, and then thump, sucks the hand in. I remember I took a sculpture class at IU, and the first portion of it was woodworking, and I remember very clearly the day the instructor was talking about how to use the tools safely, and the next day I was waiting to use the bandsaw, and this person was just standing in front of me, and they were pushing this thing, and if they'd have kept moving their hand, this thing would have split their hand like right between their middle and ring finger. And I couldn't help it. I was like, "What the hell are you doing?" And they stopped. I was like, "I'm just cutting this thing." I was like, "Yeah, your hand was about to get lopped in half."
oh my God. Yeah.
Common sense and discipline are not like intuitive things. The common sense is like earned through experience, and and discipline is gained through watching other people gain wisdom. I don't know. There's something to it though. Exceptional Radio.